Hey everyone, welcome back or welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to make a surrealist whale sculpture. This is kind of a tutorial if you want it to be one. I'm really happy with the way that mine turned out, and I would love to see if anybody recreates it. So without further ado, let's get into the video.
To start things off, I just sketched the shape and size of the whale onto a piece of cardboard on my desk, just so that I could make the aluminum foil armature to fit that shape there. So as you can see, I just made the body shape and then used this really thin wire to wrap and almost tie the fins onto the body part, because I had no idea how to make it all out of one piece, and I didn't have any thicker wire to make like an armature wire for the two front fins and the back fin. So this is what we ended up with.
It does stand by itself. So I guess now time to just start covering it in clay.
The clay that I'm using is DOS air dry clay. I haven't used air dry clay in a really long time, so it took a while for me to kind of get the hang of it again. I thought of getting some oven baked clay for this project, but because it was a fairly large project and I've never used oven baked clay before, I decided not to risk it, and I just went with the air dry clay instead. Maybe for a smaller project in the future, I'll use some oven baked clay, but it's super expensive. So in case things went wrong, I didn't want to be like spending a whole bunch of money just to have it fail and then have to rely on air dry clay anyways. So I did my best to cover the entire thing with large sheets, but that didn't work out, so I ended up just basically patching the holes that I had left over, and that's kind of why we end up with a lumpy texture. I did try to smooth it out as much as possible with water, but there is only so much that I could do. I'm also using literal dental tools that I got from the dollar store in like a toothbrush kit, because my cat knocked my toothbrush on the floor and I was in a panic to get a new toothbrush. So this was the only one that I could find, but these tools actually came in handy for moving the clay around on the surface and adding little scratches and smoothing and whatnot. So I am very glad that I actually ended up getting that, because it worked out really well for me.
All right, so this is what the whale looks like after finished. It's drying. It only took 24 hours to dry. I was using air dry clay. As you can see, there's some really interesting textures on certain parts of it, so I am just gonna go ahead and give it a little bit of a sand. Some of these textures will make for a really nice whale skin, I think, like some of this stuff on this side here, but if you're wondering for size, it's 2 stretched out hand width long. I don't know, it's a little bit longer than a ruler, I think, or maybe it's exactly like 30 centimeters. Anyways, it's pretty light because of the aluminum foil in there. I think it looks like a whale. It doesn't quite sit centered like I was hoping, like it does kind of like lean down towards the front, but that is okay. Maybe when we add more stuff to the center here, it will sit flat. Anyways, I'm going to sand some of this off camera and I will be back with the painting when we're ready.
So the sanding basically did nothing, but that's okay. I tried it and it did take off some of the very noticeable large spots, but it didn't do a whole lot for the overall shape. But I made it work, so it's okay. So what I'm doing here is I am attempting to add a dark wash to the entire surface. Either I don't know what a true dark wash is, or this is exactly what it was supposed to look like, but I've seen other sculptors on YouTube do it and I wanted to try it for myself. The next thing that I did was just mix up a medium tone blue and coat all of these surfaces that I wanted like the blue to be on. The image that I was focusing on, which I will link down below, it's actually a 3D model, had the blue coming down like halfway, and then there was a white color on the belly, which I think is very standard for whales. So then what I used was a pretty frayed brush, and I went in with a darker blue and I just splotched the color all over what I had just painted in order to give it a little bit more texture. I guess the appearance of texture, because I mean it's already pretty textured, but I wasn't about to add any more. And then I did the exact same thing with an even lighter blue. So I pretty much ended up covering all of that mid-tone blue by the time I was done with all of my splotching. But the variation between the two colors, I do go back and forth between the two just to make it really pop, ended up looking really nice and gave it quite a bit of variation. So once that blue was done, I went in with the white and painted the underside of the whale. So the color I'm using here is antique white, which is a very warm white. It's definitely off-white and almost cream. I end up changing it to just plain white, and I do recommend anybody following along with this do the same. I thought that it looked good in the lighting that I was in to use the antique white, but it turned out to look horrible, so I had to repaint and switch everything. So just skip this entire step and do it plain white instead. And what I'm doing at this point is going back with that frayed brush and just speckling around the edges in order to meld the blue and white together. And then I added the face, and now we're just adding some details along the belly, which is just splotches of blue and gray, and I added those barnacles to the front of the mouth, as well as some scars and other scratches with white and the black watered down paint that I had from before. This was probably the most fun part, just because it really started to look like a whale at this point, but it was very time consuming to add all the little scars and scratches and splotches all over him, but it was worth it in the end.
Alright, so after painting, this is what the whale is looking like. Some details on the bottom as well as the top with all of these little scratches. This area was my little experimental zone. It's going to be covered by foliage anyways, so it really doesn't matter that it looks like shit. As you can see, I went and highlighted some of the gouges in there and added some white spots to kind of act as like little scars. This is like a section of barnacles on the bottom here. Oh great, you can see my reflection in my laptop. And then of course we've got his mouth and the eyes. So this is the end of the painting for now. I think it's like 2:30 in the morning. So I will come back to this tomorrow, and that is when I will be working on the foliage and everything else that goes on top of his back. Okay, so yesterday night, or I guess really early this morning, we left off with having the whale fully painted and done. It's all dry now. I'm pretty happy with it. It's a little bit more blue than I was anticipating, but you know what? I think it looks like a whale, and that's what I was going for. So now to move on to what we're going to put on the top, I made a bunch of these little itty bitty cardboard boxes. 2 of them have all 4 or 6 sides, I guess. And then I have a couple that are open on the bottom that I'll just be gluing down. And these are meant to be little buildings, so the ones that have all their sides are going to be standing upright. Because they're taller than the other ones. Well, minus this one is kind of ugly, so not sure if I'm going to use that one at all, but anyways, I'm going to paint them as little buildings. I'm not really sure exactly what kinds of buildings they are. I'm going to paint at least these 2 gray, little yellow windows, and then maybe some of them will be slightly more brown. Couldn't figure out how to make a roof on them without it looking stupid, so I'm not really sure what we're going to do about that. We're just going to roll with it. And after these are all done, I am going to kind of place some stuff around on the whale to see what I'm going for. I have fake trees and moss to put on there, and then I will paint the back of the whale kind of green where I think it should go. So let's get into painting these itty bitty little cardboard things. And I guess before I get any further, my hands are really gross looking because of the glue from gluing all of these little cardboard things. So let's get into it.
So I started with just a base layer of a medium gray tone. It worked really well for the 5-sided buildings because I could just pop them on the top of my finger to paint them, and then I was able to paint all the sides just by rotating my finger. Then I went in with various shades of gray and brownish gray and painted all of these itty bitty little bricks onto the side, as well as like a grid for the roof, and then some doors and windows.
Okay guys, so after some painstakingly long painting, ended up with these itty bitty little houses or little buildings. Those yellow parts are supposed to be windows. I've added some green parts to be like ivy or moss. I'm not really sure what the roof is. It's probably just going to be covered anyways. But yeah, so now we have 5 painted buildings. This is just normal. I get covered in paint every single time. So now I'm going to arrange everything on the whale, and then we'll get painting again.
At this point, I figured out where I want the buildings, and now I'm just gonna glue the trees on. It's really funny for me to see the trees sliding down the whale at this point because I could tell that they were sliding down, but it's really funny to watch it in time lapse. Anyways, they eventually did stay in place and I glued the buildings down after I went around and painted everything on the back that I wanted to green. At this point, I think I also had painted the rest of the whale in a glossy Mod Podge to give it a sheen and kind of the illusion that it's supposed to be wet as if it was actually swimming in the water. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking this moss that I bought and ripping it up into tiny little pieces and using my glue and sticking it to the whale. I believe this is actually real moss. It smelled kind of funky when I pulled it out of the bag, but that's probably what happens when you put live plants in plastic bags and leave them for a while. Anyways, my fingers got horribly sticky while doing this, so I had a lot of moss glued to myself as well as the whale. I tried to use that broken popsicle stick, but it didn't always work. It was easier to use that stick when I was trying to get right in the middle, where I couldn't really reach with my fingers in between the buildings and the trees in the center, but I had to use my fingers for most of it just because the moss was also sticking to the popsicle stick, and that wasn't what I wanted either. But I'm really happy with the way that it ended up turning out. Here are some glamour shots. I do not have a Lazy Susan turntable, so excuse the fact that I have to use my hand for this. In this lighting, you can really see that I used that glossy Mod Podge, as well as you can see just how much of the whale that I did cover with moss. In order to glue everything down and lock it all in place, I did use an isopropyl alcohol and like watered down Mod Podge mixture, and it worked really well. It is a little crusty, but that's okay. Everything is going to stay right in place where it should. Here's the finished sculpture. I love it so much. I think it turned out so cool. Thank you to everybody who watched this video. I had a lot of fun making this sculpture, even though it took a really long time and sometimes was really frustrating. But I think it's so cool, and it was so nice to finally make a sculpture again after so many years. So just for reference, I measured it. It is in fact about 12 inches long. So just to give you a little bit of a size reference. Anyways, thank you so much for watching the video, and I will see you all next week.